Support for Consider This is provided by the University of Nebraska at Omaha College of Communication, Fine Arts, and Media.
From the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha, Consider This, a program of issues and information behind today's news.
Mighty God, you have given your only Son to be for the sacrifice for sin, and also an example of godly life.
Just one of many ways to reflect on the suffering and death of Jesus. Today, we'll introduce you to another. Hi everyone, I'm Kathy Wyatt. Welcome to this week's edition of Consider This. Our topic, 14 from the crowd. Here to talk more about it are playwright and Omaha public school teacher Kevin Eitenayer and Danny Ledger, a Christian musician, retreat leader, and founder of Hope of the Poor Mission. Thank you both so much for being here and welcome.
Thank you very much for having us.
Kevin, we are entering the final days of the Lenten season. Talk to us about what that means.
To me, Lent is one of the most powerful seasons of the year. It's that time where we really take to prepare for the mystery and wonder of Easter. But Lent is it is that time of preparation. So it's a time of fasting, it's a time of prayer, it's a time of self-exam. For me, the words that best sum up Lent are some of the very first words you hear on Ash Wednesday, when you receive your ashes and the person putting them on says, "Remember, dust you are, and dust you shall return." And to me, that Lent is about remembering our humanity, our mortality. It's remembering we are sinners. It's remember that we live surrounded by sinners. And so there's injustice in the world, there's suffering in the world. I watched just recently a couple of your programs, the one about the floods and the one about the fake news. And just those perfect examples of we're surrounded by suffering, we're surrounded very often by liars and malicious people. That's part of the human condition. Very often we try to ignore that, and Lent really reminds us to take a good hard look at it. As we do, I think we sort of figure out that, wow, we're in a bad way, I'm in a bad way, I need to repent, I need to change. And we struggle with that. We work on it during Lent. But I think ultimately we realize we can't do it on our own. And then that takes us to Jesus Christ and this Son of God who, for our sake, enters into our human condition and into our mortality, into our sinfulness and injustice and suffering, and redeems us through his suffering. And that takes us to the joy of Easter. And Lent and the Stations of the Cross are always about the joy of Easter, but they're that period before that really prepares us. I'm a big Dante fan, and it's before he can reach heaven, he's got to go through hell. And that's sort of something like Lent to me, is you have to go through the darkness before you can really understand and appreciate and receive the light.
Thank you. And Danny, he talked about getting close to Easter. The Triduum, we hear that word. What does that mean?
The Triduum is it's the beginning of the new liturgical year. You have Holy Thursday, Good Friday, and Holy Saturday, and these are leading into Easter. And so they're these days right before Easter.
Okay, let's go back to Good Friday. Talk about the significance of that.
Good Friday would be the day where this is the day Jesus died. And so as we're talking about the Stations of the Cross, those stations happened on Good Friday. And the irony in the name Good Friday is one of the most evil things that ever happened on this day, where the most innocent person in human history was falsely accused and condemned to death and brutally tortured and executed. And but also because of the resurrection, because he was the Son of God, and through his suffering and death saved mankind. That great evil became the greatest good, and that's why we call it Good Friday.
So many people wanting to reenact that final day, Danny. And I guess for the purposes of this program, talk about how that desire to want to reenact morphed and evolved into the Stations of the Cross.
Well, I think it probably started pretty early with Mary, Jesus' mother, the early disciples, his followers, wanting to remember, wanting to walk the way that he walked, and to remember and to just pray with those memories that they would have had firsthand, and I think that anyone who would have seen Jesus go through that would know that there was significance there of his suffering and of his death. And then I think throughout the years, you have Constantine making Christianity legal in 312, I think, and then those sites were preserved by the Christians, but now they were able to be marked and honored and venerated by the Christians who had come. And then even in the 400s, you have early Christians that are making pilgrimages there to walk the way of the cross, to follow in Jesus' footsteps. And then through that, the Franciscans really, in the 1300s, bringing that, preserving those holy sites throughout the Holy Land, but also really promoting that. And then in the 1500s, the Turks making, forbidding any Christian pilgrimages. The Franciscans would have to take those memories back to Europe, and they would reconstruct those holy sites and those scenes and those places. And that was kind of the beginning of this development of the Stations of the Cross that just developed over the next 500 years into what they are today.
Wow, and you best go through this by storytelling. So walk us through the Stations of the Cross the way that you like to do.
Yeah, I guess the Stations of the Cross, throughout history, they've had different numbers, from 7 to 30 and different, but the traditional is 14 Stations of the Cross. And the first one is Jesus is condemned to death. And as he's condemned, they give him his cross. We have Pilate saying, that he is the King of the Jews, and then he will be executed for coming up against Rome, really. And so Jesus is condemned to death, and then he takes up his cross. And after he takes up his cross, the third station will be he falls for the first time. And in Christian tradition, in our Catholic tradition, we pray this prayer.
We adore you, O Christ.
We adore you, O Christ, and we praise you because by your holy cross you have redeemed the world. And so this, through these stations, they really just become this prayer, and we're reading this through the scriptures and through the Psalms and just reflecting and meditating on them. And so the fourth station, Jesus meets his afflicted mother. And if you can just imagine how powerful that moment is as he meets his mother. And then we have Simon of Cyrene being pulled from the crowd because they see Jesus being scourged and tortured so much he would not make it to Golgotha. He wouldn't make it to the site where he would be crucified. And so they pulled someone from the crowd to help him carry his cross. And then we have Veronica meeting him along the way and taking her veil and wiping the face of Jesus. And in Christian tradition, we have a belief that his face miraculously appeared on her veil after she wiped the face of Jesus. And then from there, Jesus falls again for the second time. And then after the fall for the second time, he meets the women of Jerusalem. And the women of Jerusalem are weeping and they're crying. And he says, "Do not weep for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children." And then he falls again for the third time. And then he's stripped of everything he has. He's stripped of his, of all of his clothes, and even in a fulfillment of Old Testament scripture, the soldiers cast lots for his garments. And after that, Jesus is nailed to the cross. And then the 12th station, Jesus dies on the cross. The 13th station, Jesus is taken down and placed in the arms of his mother. And this scene has been depicted by Michelangelo in the Pietà, and in a haunting recreation in Mel Gibson's Passion of the Christ, you see this scene of her holding her son. And it's powerful. And then the 14th station, Jesus is laid in the tomb.
Thank you. And Kevin, Danny mentioned the depictions. We have 3 photos that we want to put up for our viewers. Just briefly tell us, these are just 3 examples of different ways to depict. Go ahead and take a look at that first one.
This looks like a depiction from European art, probably maybe from Italy. If you go into any Catholic church around the world, you'll see the Stations of the Cross somewhere in the church. And these are just sort of that typical example of the Stations of the Cross in a typical church. Mm-hmm. And this is a fairly new creation of the Stations of the Cross at the cloisters on the Platte. If you haven't been out there, they're just beautiful. They're lifelike, almost larger than lifelike, very realistic, very powerful and intense. I've been out there once, and I just really want to get out there again before this Lenten season is over, because they're just
Absolutely.
beautiful.
And from all of this, Kevin, you came up with something called 14 from the Crowd. Talk about that production.
So 14 from the Crowd. I've always had a great love for the stations, and it just seemed at one point, as I was meditating on them, I just started to think about, what would it be like to have been there? Mm-hmm. And the more I meditated upon that, the more it just sort of, voices came to me, and there were voices from the crowd. So what was it like to stand in that crowd and scream for Jesus' death? Or if you love Jesus, what was it like to stand there next to that person who was screaming for his death? Or what was it like to see Jesus take his cross? I mean, who would take his cross? Who would do that willingly and not be forced? Or to see Mary face Jesus and to wonder, what's going on there? So for each of the stations, I sort of imagined and just meditated upon, what would it have been like to, not to be the person there, not to be Jesus, not to be Mary, not to be Simon or Serene or Veronica, but to see someone just seeing that moment and responding to it. And some of the people respond with passion, with love, or with kindness. Some are angry and bitter. So there's all types of reactions that we show as part of our presentation of 14 from the Crowd. Our goal is just to really help people be there, to sort of experience it as if they were next to that person.
Right.
And having to respond to what's happening to Jesus, having to respond to what that person is saying and thinking, having to figure out for themselves what they would have thought, what they would have said.
And you incorporated music into this. Talk about Danny's involvement, especially when it comes to your nonprofit, Hope of the Poor. Talk about that relationship and how important it is for him to be a part of this.
All right, well, now I guess I would just first say we wanted to make these theatrical in nature, because they are just so theatrical in nature. You know, there's the drama that's just inherent in them. But we wanted to shine a light on the performer. We wanted to have music, because music is so dramatic. We wanted to have visuals that go along with each station that's projected largely for people to see. So we wanted to include all of the arts, but music is just one of the most important. I mean, you know that music just has a way of touching the heart, touching the soul, drawing the best of us out. And I wanted a musician, and would have only taken a musician who had two things that really mattered. You know, one is just this incredible deep faith. There's a lot of great musicians that just don't have a deep faith. But the other thing I wanted is a musician with real talent. If you've ever gone, and we've all been there, you go to a service of some kind and there's a singer who has this heartfelt talent, she's doing her best, but you know, it's just honestly not that good. I just really felt if we were going to do the stations and do them in this way, we needed someone who could really, really do it well. And Danny was that person. Danny sings for us at the end of each station a psalm, a line from Psalms. And that sort of encapsulates that station, gives a little bit of hope at the end of each station. And you know, if I had to imagine King David in his temple writing and singing his psalms, he would look like Danny, because that's just the faith, that's the love, that's the passion, that's the reverence that Danny brings to it.
Well, and Danny, very kind words coming from Kevin. This stuff just doesn't happen, though. I mean, gifted musician, but to Kevin's point, deeply rooted in your faith. What do you bring to all of this? Talk a little bit about your background and even your nonprofit to give us a sense of your journey here to what we're talking about today.
I guess I've been working with Kevin in doing youth ministry for longer than the nonprofit's been around, and we've been doing this 14 from the crowd for longer than the nonprofit's been around. So really, this came first. I've always had a heart for using music to bring people closer to God, and this was just a beautiful opportunity to do that in a really, really powerful way. And so, I was honored at this opportunity to be able to bring, my creativity to the table, because he just gave me the psalms, the prayers, and I could write and arrange the music for that and complement each station and read through and pray through the script and see like what would be the emotion of this particular station, and that in combination with the performance of the actor portraying that person from the crowd, and then kind of weaving that in, and then even at the beginning just setting the tone and a kind of a somber feel with a traditional hymn like "Were You There When They Crucified My Lord," and so that just kind of setting that tone, and then keeping that solemn feeling throughout the meditation, and then ending with another psalm that's really, really uplifting and joyful, actually, anticipating Jesus' resurrection. But then I like to kind of let them pray with those words of the good thief on the cross next to Jesus, who said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom."
This is, obviously a very, very emotional topic to address. I'm picturing the two of you sitting down and putting all of this together. What has it done for the two of you, the playwright and the musician? You must have worked, tell me, how long did you work on this before it came to be in any kind of parish or setting?
I worked on it. I'm a slow writer. have a real job and a real family, so I'm a slow writer. But I also just, by nature, I dwell on things and then write and rewrite, and just like the composition teachers in college tell you, write it again, revise it again. And so it took a couple years for me to really get things written into the form that I wanted. And once I did, then what Danny was so great at was just almost intuitively knowing this is exactly the way, I can't write a note, I can't sing a tune, but I knew what I wanted. And somehow, I guess maybe from working with one another for a long time, Danny was just in tune to that too, and just the right music, just the right way.
Yeah, and in many of the depictions, as we know, you've got your leaders in your congregation. They're reading from prayer books, right? You, though, you're monologue presenters. I mean, you're pretty specific about wanting them to memorize and then be able to perform in character their roles. So question number one, how do you find these people? And then question number two, why is that so important?
Well, question number one, my wife will love that you asked this, because that was one of the things that once I had it written and I showed it to a friend who was a deacon, and he said, yeah, this is nice, we ought to do this. And then, as so often happens when you're in the middle of doing something, then the fear sets in, like, how could I? And I really had no idea where to go get 14 performers who would willingly memorize lines and do this for free, and show up and be on time and all those things. But my wife just has a nice circle of friends. We have a good circle of friends from our church and things, but she really just encouraged me first of all, and then put the word out. And amazingly, just through largely her circle of friends and then friends of friends, somehow or another we found the people for the first time, and it just really went well. And we learned a lot. And then the second year we had a core group of people who were still with us. We found a few more and it just really became now we have a pretty solid core of people each year who perform for us and help us out.
I need to ask, do you know about how many performances you've had of this?
We've been doing it for 9 years. The first 6 or 7 years we just did one performance a year. And the last couple years we've done 2. We started at St. Elizabeth Ann Seton, about 108th and Ford in Omaha, if you're in the area. And then the last couple of years, we really felt the call to take this elsewhere, with the idea of really promoting the stations. It's just that, again, our devotion to the stations. So we've gone to St. James in Northwest Omaha also. We've gone to St. Bernard's in Benson area. We went to St. Wenceslas this year, and to St. Patrick's in Fremont this year. That was a really neat experience because we got there just literally the day after the floodwaters receded, the day that we could get there. And those, they were just fantastic people to present to.
So how is it, we just have a few minutes remaining, how is it that people leave this? What has been the common, you see them come in and then you see them go out. What is that feeling?
It's really great. You have to cut me off too, but at the start, at the very first station, our performer comes out and literally screams, crucify him, crucify him. And his monologue ends with him expressing his desire to pound the nails himself. And when you see the audience there, that's always one of my favorite moments, because when you see the audience, they sort of realize that this is not the stations they went to when they were in 7th grade, at church. It's something, I like to think of our stations as the PG-13 stations. They're really for adults. They're, which is truly, the stations are an adult thing. At the end, there's usually pretty silence. We say, you can stay here in church, or you can leave quietly. Usually Danny plays some of his awesome meditative music, and for the most part, people like to sit there in silence for a while. Then slowly they leave.
What is your hope for the future of this production, Kevin?
Oh, I have a lot of hopes. One thing I would like to do is just get it out there more. I'd like to build a good website. Right now I don't have a website that can even sort of publicize it or that people can turn to. I would like to someday get it, like an audio tape of it and a videotape of it that, although I prefer the live performance, it's the best. still technology is awesome, and you can get it to so many people through technology and through video. So I would eventually like to do it in those formats as well.
So do me a favor, I know you have an email address, so go ahead and share that with us and we'll make sure our viewers have it. What is your email address?
Thank you. It's KJJA, then my last name EUTENEUER at AOL.com.
And so if people want to learn more about this, they can just shoot you an email?
Just shoot me an email. Just put 14 in the subject matter. I'll be sure to see it, and I'll be sure to respond to it. And I would love to hear anyone had a question or anyone had a comment. Would make my day.
Fantastic. Danny, I'm going to give it to you. We've got about 30 seconds. Final thoughts about 14 from the crowd.
It's just a beautiful, beautiful way to prepare our hearts for Easter, to remember what Jesus did for us. And I want anyone who's praying with the Stations of the Cross, or who came to 14 from the crowd, I would want them to leave with I guess the answer to that question. Were you there when they crucified my Lord? And for them to be kind of transported outside of space and time to that place and really feel like they were there.
Thank you both very much for joining us and for sharing your stories with us. Best wishes to you both moving forward. To our students, of course, working behind the scenes, and our viewers for watching. As we close, scenes from the Desert Dome at Omaha's Henry Doorly Zoo and Aquarium as seen through the lens of Jeremy Davis, a junior right here at UNO. We'll see you next week.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television. More information and program archives can be found at netnebraska.org/considerthis. If you'd like to share your comments about this program, call UNO Television at 402-554-2516 during regular business hours, or send an email to cwyatt@unomaha.edu.
Support for Consider This is provided by the University of Nebraska at Omaha College of Communication, Fine Arts, and Media.